To the outside world, the Bennets were the epitome of perfection, a dynasty built on wealth, influence, and an unshakable reputation. Olivia Bennet was the shining jewel in that crown, poised, intelligent, and seemingly destined for greatness. But beneath the polished veneer of gala nights and whispered compliments, the family hid fractures no one dared speak of. From the moment I was old enough to understand, the rules of the Bennet household were clear. Appear flawless. Speak only when spoken to. Hide any doubts behind a practiced smile. I wore my mask well. Yet, as I grew older, I began to see cracks, subtle signs of tension, and secrets lurking behind closed doors. It was the night of my parents' anniversary gala that the illusion began to unravel. The grand ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Voices mingled with laughter and clinking glasses, but my gaze was drawn to my father Gregory, locked in a hushed, tense conversation, with a man whose presence sent a chill down my spine. Words like risk, cover-up, and exposure floated through the air. I pressed myself against a pillar, heart pounding, absorbing the shadows behind our perfect mask. The days that followed were filled with more questions than answers. Late-night phone calls, secret meetings, and a growing distance between family members. One afternoon, I caught my mother Evelyn shedding a rare tear in the solitude of her study. "Mum, what's wrong?" I asked gently. She wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing, dear. Some things adults have to handle." But I knew better. The perfect mask was slipping, and I was determined to uncover what lay beneath. The following morning, the mansion buzzed with its usual energy, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like a volcano ready to erupt. Every smile exchanged between family members felt strained, every word spoken carefully measured. I found myself wandering through the grand corridors, past rooms filled with portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to judge every move. The weight of expectation pressed down on me heavier than ever before. In the library, I stumbled upon a conversation between my father and his closest confidant. Their voices were low, but urgent. "Gregory, the Foundation's accounts don't balance. If the auditors catch this, we're finished," the man warned. Gregory's reply was cold and determined. "No one can know. We protect the family at all costs." Hearing those words, I realized that the life I'd known was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. The more I listened, the clearer it became the Bennet dynasty was more fragile than anyone dared admit. That evening I confronted my mother again, desperate for answers. "Evelyn, please," I pleaded. "I can't keep living in the dark. Tell me what's happening." She hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Olivia, some truths are too dangerous. Sometimes protecting those we love means making impossible choices." Her words meant to comfort only fueled my determination. I refused to be kept in the dark any longer. Over the next few weeks, I began to dig quietly, carefully. I reviewed financial statements, listened to hushed conversations, and sought out those who might know more than they were willing to say. Each discovery chipped away at the illusion of perfection, revealing a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and power struggles. The perfect mask was cracking, and I was ready to face whatever lay beneath. The mansion's grandeur had always felt like a stage, polished and perfect for the eyes of the world. But now, every corner whispered secrets, and every glance hid suspicion. Since that night at the gala, I had become hyper-aware of the subtle changes around me. The smiles no longer reached the eyes, and conversations seemed to halt when I entered the room. It was as if the walls themselves were conspiring to keep me in the dark. I began watching more closely my father's frequent disappearances into his private study. The hushed phone calls that stopped abruptly when I approached, and the sudden unexplained tension between my parents. My brother Derek, once jovial and carefree, now moved with a guarded air, his easy charm replaced by a tight-lipped seriousness that made me uneasy. One afternoon, I found myself lingering near the business wing, where I overheard a conversation between Derek and one of my father's associates. "The investors are getting nervous," Derek said quietly. "If this leaks, it could ruin us all." The words ruin and leak echoed ominously. I pressed my back against the cold marble pillar, heart pounding. What were they hiding, and how deep did the rot go? Later that night, I confronted Derek in the quiet of the family garden. "Why are you hiding things from me?" I demanded. "What aren't you telling me about Dad?" His eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. "Guilt, fear, Isabella. This isn't just about business. It's about protecting the family." "But at what cost?" I whispered. His silence was answer enough. Determined to uncover the truth, I sought out allies outside the family friends I trusted from college, and old acquaintances in the business world. Together we began piecing together a picture of deceit and betrayal far more extensive than I had imagined. Anonymous tips, financial discrepancies, and shadowy transactions formed a puzzle I was desperate to solve. But with every step closer to the truth, the danger grew. Threats arrived in veiled warnings, strange cars followed my own, and once trusted friends grew distant. The silence around me was deafening, a warning that the deeper I dug, the more I risked. Yet I was no longer the sheltered daughter of the Bennets. I was a woman ready to confront the darkness, no matter what the cost. The pursuit of truth was a treacherous path, one littered with broken trust and hidden dangers. Every secret uncovered felt like peeling back a layer of my own world, a world I no longer recognized. One evening, while sifting through documents late into the night, I stumbled upon something that chilled me to the bone. A set of falsified financial reports, carefully disguised, but revealing a massive embezzlement scheme tied directly to my father. The betrayal was staggering. The man I had admired, the patriarch of the Morgan dynasty, was at the centre of a web of corruption. Determined to find answers, I confronted Derek, hoping for honesty from my brother. His face tightened, eyes avoiding mine. "Isabella, you don't understand the consequences if this gets out." "But it already is," I said firmly. "I can't pretend anymore." As the walls closed in, I realised the true extent of the conspiracy. It wasn't just family. Trusted advisors and business partners were complicit, hiding the truth for their own gain. I knew exposing them would ignite a storm, one that could destroy us all. But some truths are worth the risk. With the help of a few trusted allies, I began building a case, collecting evidence, recording conversations, and preparing to challenge the very foundation of my family's empire. Yet with every step forward, the shadows fought back. Threats, intimidation, and isolation became my new reality. But I was resolute. The veil of deception was lifting, and nothing would stop me from revealing what lay beneath. The revelations I uncovered began to fracture the very foundations of the Bennet family. The once unshakable bonds between us now lay shattered, splintered by secrets and lies that cut deeper than any blade. The dinner table, once a place of warmth and laughter, had turned cold and silent. Conversations were replaced by tense glances and heavy silences, each family member grappling with the reality none of us wanted to face. My mother, Evelyn, withdrew into herself, her graceful composure replaced by quiet despair. I caught her staring out the window one evening, her eyes distant, lost in a world of regret. "Mum," I said softly, "we can't keep pretending. We have to face this together." She turned to me, tears glistening. "Some wounds run too deep, Isabella. Sometimes the pain of truth is more than we can bear." My brother Derek grew distant, consumed by his own battles and divided loyalties. His once easy smiles were now rare, replaced by furrowed brows and clenched fists. Victoria, ever the tactician, retreated behind a mask of cold calculation. Her words to me were sharp and cutting. "You're playing a dangerous game, Isabella. Be careful you don't lose yourself in the process." But I was no longer willing to back down. With each fractured bond, my resolve strengthened. The family I had loved was crumbling, but I was determined to rebuild, not for their sake, but for mine. Because sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against enemies, but within. The tension inside the Bennet mansion had reached a boiling point. Every day felt like walking on a razor's edge. One wrong move and everything could shatter completely. I found myself pacing the long corridors late into the night, the silence pressing down on me heavier than any words ever could. The once vibrant household was now a battleground of silent grudges, whispered accusations, and broken promises. At dinner, the family sat around the grand oak table, a facade of civility barely masking the storm beneath. My father Gregory wore a mask of controlled anger. My mother Evelyn hid tears behind a practiced smile. My brother Derek avoided eye contact, and Victoria's icy gaze pierced me with silent warning. I could no longer pretend. The time for silence had passed. The next morning I summoned the family to the drawing room, a place where so many memories were made, and now where truths would be confronted. "Enough," I said, my voice steady but resolute. "I know about the money, the lies, the betrayals. This ends now." The room fell into a heavy silence. Gregory's eyes blazed with fury. "You don't understand the consequences of your words." "Maybe," I replied, "but I understand the cost of your secrets." Victoria's lips curled into a cold smile. "You think you can destroy us? You're only hurting yourself." But I was no longer the scared girl trapped in a gilded cage. The confrontation ignited a firestorm. Voices rose, accusations flew, and years of suppressed anger exploded. In the chaos, I saw the family I loved broken, flawed, but still standing. And I knew this was the moment everything would change. The fallout from the family confrontation was immediate and severe. The fragile alliances within the Bennett household shattered completely, leaving behind a landscape of mistrust and open hostility. I knew that if I wanted to survive and win, I couldn't rely on old ties or empty promises. The storm was gathering both within the walls of our estate and far beyond. I began by carefully selecting my allies, people outside the family who shared a thirst for justice and truth. Among them were Claire, a fiercely intelligent attorney whose dedication to exposing corruption was unmatched, and Marcus, a seasoned private investigator whose network of contacts stretched across the city's underbelly. Together, we combed through layers of financial documents, tracing money trails that twisted and turned through shell companies' offshore accounts and fabricated contracts. The scope of the deception was staggering, a web so vast it ensnared not just family members but trusted business associates and powerful figures. Every discovery was a piece of the puzzle, but also a trigger that set off waves of retaliation. Anonymous threats arrived in the dead of night. Notes slipped under my door. Shadowy figures parked outside my apartment, phone calls with silence on the other end. It was clear they wanted me to stop, but I was relentless. My relationship with Lucas, once strained, deepened into a partnership of mutual support and shared resolve. We held late-night strategy sessions, preparing for the battles ahead, legal, personal, and emotional. At the same time, cracks appeared in the opposition. Board members, once loyal to Gregory, began questioning his leadership, swayed by the mounting evidence and the growing fear of being implicated. The media caught wind of the scandal. Carefully leaked stories stirred public outrage and pressure, forcing investigations into the Morgan Foundation and its dealings. But the storm was far from over. As the fight escalated, I learned that survival required more than truth. It demanded strategy, courage, and sacrifice. And I was ready to face whatever came next. The closer I got to exposing the truth, the more I realized the danger wasn't only from my father or sister, it was from within my own circle. Betrayal had found a home among those I once trusted most. It began with subtle signs: a phone call dropped, a meeting cancelled without explanation, and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Suspicion gnawed at me like a relentless shadow. Then Marcus delivered news that shook me to the core. "We intercepted communications," he said, voice low. "Someone close to you has been feeding information back to Gregory and Victoria." The betrayal stung like a cold blade. How could someone I trusted, someone who had been there through my darkest hours, turn against me? I arranged to meet the betrayer in a quiet, neutral place, a small cafe tucked away from prying eyes. Their smile was warm, but their eyes were calculating. When I asked why, their answer was chilling. In this family, loyalty is survival. Sometimes survival means betrayal. Those words haunted me long after we parted. From that moment, I trusted no one completely. Every ally was tested, every gesture analysed. The enemy within was the most dangerous of all, a constant, invisible threat. Yet I refused to let fear rule me. I tightened my circle of loyalty, fortified my defences, and prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Because in this war of shadows, only the strongest survive. The Morgan Empire, once a fortress of unshakable power, began to crumble under the relentless pressure of truth. What had been carefully hidden behind polished facades and whispered promises was now laid bare for all to see. The boardroom meetings, once arenas of confident negotiation, devolved into scenes of heated accusations and fractured loyalties. Investors pulled out, partnerships dissolved, and the media frenzy left no corner untouched. The family's public image shattered, replaced by headlines that screamed scandal and betrayal. At home, the mansion transformed into a battleground. Evelyn's serene composure gave way to silent tears and weary exhaustion. Richard, once the commanding patriarch, appeared diminished, haunted by the consequences of his actions. Victoria's poised mask cracked, revealing desperation beneath. One rainy evening, I overheard a confrontation between my parents in the dimly lit hallway. "You should have stopped this," Evelyn whispered, voice trembling. "There was no stopping it," Richard replied bitterly. "Our empire is collapsing." That night, as thunder rolled overhead, I stood alone on the balcony, watching the storm rage below. The family I knew was gone, replaced by fragments and shadows. But from destruction comes rebirth, and I was ready to rebuild. The aftermath of the collapse was a period of profound transformation. The once formidable Morgan name lay tarnished, its influence diminished and its legacy questioned. Yet amid the ruins I found an unexpected freedom. Without the weight of pretense and secrecy, I began to rediscover myself beyond the shadows of betrayal and family expectations. The path to healing was neither easy nor swift, but each step forward was a victory. Ethan, steadfast and unwavering, stood by my side as we navigated the uncertain terrain of rebuilding. Together we forged new alliances founded on trust and shared vision, distancing ourselves from the toxic ties of the past. The city skyline, once a symbol of our dominance, now represented endless possibilities. The future was uncharted, but for the first time it felt authentically mine. The scars of betrayal remained reminders of battles fought and lessons learned, but they no longer defined me. With resilience born of adversity, I embraced the new dawn, ready to write a story of hope, strength, and renewal. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as the day of reckoning arrived. Months of preparation, investigation, and gathering allies culminated in this decisive moment. The confrontation that would either restore justice or bury it forever. I stood at the centre of the room, dossier in hand, every page a testament to the truth I had fought so hard to unveil. The faces around me were masks of anticipation, fear, and defiance. Richard Morgan sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding but strained. Victoria beside him was poised, yet the tight grip on her notes betrayed the pressure she felt. As I began presenting the evidence, financial records, intercepted communications, witness statements, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers grew into murmurs, murmurs into gasps. Each revelation chipped away at the empire built on lies, exposing the rot beneath. Richard's fury simmered beneath his calm exterior. "This is fabrication," he hissed. "A calculated attack to destroy our family." But the evidence was undeniable. Victoria's composure cracked under scrutiny, her defences faltering. The board members exchanged glances, the weight of truth overwhelming their loyalty. When the vote was called, the decision was clear. Gregory Morgan was removed from his position, investigations launched, and Victoria's influence curtailed. The empire was no more. The room remained tense as the decision sank in the silence, punctuated only by the rustle of papers and heavy breaths. Gregory's once imposing presence diminished, replaced by a man grappling with the fall from power. His eyes darted around, searching for allies, but found none. Victoria's defiance flickered before fading, her shoulders slumping slightly. The fortress they had built was breached, and there was no turning back. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that truth had triumphed, sorrow for the family that had been lost in the process. Outside, reporters clamoured for answers, their questions a relentless tide. I stood firm, ready to face the storm, knowing that the fight for justice was far from over. The reckoning was just the beginning. The courtroom was vast and impersonal, its cold marble walls echoing with the solemnity of justice. Months of turmoil, relentless investigation, and painful testimonies all led to this moment. A moment where the truth was no longer just a whispered secret, but an undeniable verdict. Gregory Morgan, the formidable patriarch who had ruled his empire with iron will and whispered deals, now sat humbled and exposed. The charges fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, no longer rumours or hidden truths, but hard documented facts. Watching him, I felt a turbulent mix of emotions. There was the satisfaction of justice served, but also a profound sadness for the man I had once admired, whose ambition had corrupted him, and by extension corrupted the family I loved. Victoria's downfall was swift and equally brutal. Her involvement in the deception laid bare, her influence stripped away piece by piece. The poised, untouchable daughter now faced a public reckoning that shattered the illusion she had so carefully maintained. Evelyn, the family matriarch, retreated into shadows, her grace replaced by silence and the heavy weight of regret. She was a figure transformed, embodying the tragic cost of secrets kept and loyalty misplaced. As the verdict echoed through the chambers, I sat quietly absorbing the reality that the family I had known was irrevocably changed. The bonds that had once defined us, love, loyalty, trust, lay fractured and fragile. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy was relentless. Reporters clamoured for every detail, their cameras flashing like strobe lights, capturing the downfall of a dynasty. I faced them with a calm resolve, knowing that this was not just about exposing corruption, but about reclaiming dignity. In the days that followed, I began the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding not just the shattered reputation of the Morgans, but my own identity. I sought to define myself beyond the shadows of betrayal, beyond the weight of legacy. Friends old and new rallied around me. They reminded me that family is not solely blood, it is the chosen bonds, forged through trust and compassion. Therapy sessions helped me unravel the emotional knots tied by years of deception. Quiet moments of reflection became a sanctuary where I could confront pain and nurture healing. I poured energy into philanthropic work, determined to create something meaningful from the wreckage. The foundation, once a symbol of greed, was slowly transformed into a beacon of hope and transparency. Financial recovery was arduous. Lawsuits and settlements drained resources, but with the support of dedicated advisors, we charted a path towards stability. Most importantly, I learned to forgive, not to forget, but to release the hold of bitterness that threatened to consume me. The future was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but for the first time it felt authentically mine, a landscape waiting to be shaped by truth, resilience, and hope. As I looked out over the city skyline from my modest apartment, I understood that endings are also beginnings. The ashes of the past nourished the seeds of renewal, and I was ready to grow. The first rays of dawn slipped gently through the windows of my new apartment. A humble space compared to the sprawling estates I had known, yet it felt like freedom incarnate. The city below was waking alive with possibility, and the endless hum of life continuing, indifferent to the battles I had fought and the scars I bore. For years I had lived under the weight of the Morgan name, trapped by expectations, secrets and betrayals that threatened to consume me. But now, standing on the cusp of a new chapter, I understood something profound. Identity is not inherited. It is forged. The scars of my past were not stains, but stories, painful, yes, but also proof of survival and strength. I traced my fingers along the lines of an old photograph, the edges worn from years of handling. It was a reminder of who I was and who I had become. The journey from the gilded cage of my upbringing to this moment had been arduous and filled with loss. Friends lost to fear or betrayal, family torn apart by ambition and deceit, and countless nights wrestling with doubt and pain. Yet here I was, breathing freely, ready to embrace a life defined by my own choices. I reflected on the people who had stood by me, Lucas, whose unwavering support had been a steady light. Claire, whose fierce dedication had opened doors to justice. Marcus, whose relentless pursuit of truth had uncovered shadows long hidden. They were my chosen family anchors in a sea of uncertainty. I began to craft a vision for the future, one built not on legacy or wealth, but on authenticity, compassion, and courage. I envisioned a foundation reborn, dedicated to transparency and healing, a symbol of what could arise from the ashes of destruction. The city skyline, once a reminder of entrapment and pretense, now stretched before me as a canvas of infinite possibility. I took a deep breath, savouring the quiet strength that had replaced fear. Because sometimes it is in the darkest nights that we find our brightest light. And this was my new dawn. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, the sense of renewal grew stronger within me. I embraced the freedom to redefine myself outside the shadows of my family's past, no longer the heiress bound by legacy, but a woman carving her own path. I immersed myself in causes close to my heart, focusing on philanthropy with a transparency and honesty that had been sorely lacking. The foundation became a beacon not of old money and power, but of hope and healing. Conversations that once felt suffocating and superficial evolved into meaningful connections. Friends became family, and trust was rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. One afternoon, walking through a bustling city park, I realized that life was no longer about survival. It was about thriving. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer defined my worth. I had learned that true strength came not from wealth or influence, but from the courage to face pain, to forgive, and to grow. At night, as the city lights flickered like stars beneath my window, I often reflected on the journey, the losses, the battles, the quiet moments of hope that carried me through. The Morgan name no longer held power over me. I had reclaimed my story. With a heart unburdened and eyes set forward, I stepped confidently into the future, a future of my own making. Because sometimes the greatest dawns follow the darkest nights.